Hello and welcome to another episode of Neurodiversity in Discussion. I am your co-host, David Gray Hammond. I'm here with my other co-host, Tanya Radkin. Would
Hello.
you hello, Tanya? So today we're going to talk about neurodivergent burnout, and we're saying neurodivergent because burnout doesn't just affect autistic people. And we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty of that in the course of this podcast. Tanya, is there anything you wanted to add to that introduction?
No, not really. I think we'll just get into it. But yeah, it's burnout is it's such a broad term and people burn out in so many different ways and have so many different things going on with them. It can, people are so individual. So we wanted to cover neurodivergent burnout because actually we're all so individual.
Yeah, just a note before we start. Obviously, this is a live recorded podcast. We have an audience here. The audience is welcome to weigh in with their thoughts, opinions, questions. You can do this either in the chat space by text, or you can raise your hand and join in by voice. Just remember, obviously, this will be going out as a podcast. So if you weigh in by voice, your voice will be on the podcast. Um, so let's get into it. I'm just gonna get the chat ready so I can see it. Okay, so Tanya, why don't you tell me what the word burnout means to you?
Well, what's burnout really? What is burnout commonly understood as? So let's start there. Um, you know, Autistic burnout has been something that's been kind of community knowledge for as many years as I can remember, really. Um, God, how many years has it been? A lot of years.
Been
So,
about a decade, I think.
yeah. So anyway, for as many years as I can remember, a bit like masking and all of these wonderful things that are now in literature, which we understand as common experiences of autistic people, burnout's always been there. And it's really described as a chronic case of exhaustion, really, like using up all of your resources with no cleanup crew, I think was one of the little sound bites from a paper by Raymaker. Um, Autistic burnout really has only been in academic literature since 2021, was it? I think the first paper was
Round
published.
about then. Might have
Yeah,
been 2020.
or even 2020, I can't remember. But anyway, it's a very, very fresh and new thing. And in fact, I always say this, a lot of the updated autism discourse is very, very fresh and new because actually, even if we're going all the way back to monotropism, which I like to think as, the beginning part of the New Testament, if you like, in autism discourse, that paper was only written in 1993. So in terms of like knowledge production, autism was first identified in 1911, although there's arguments to say that that was stolen from somewhere else. Was it Goodney Shakarava? I don't know. But anyway, so it's all very fresh and new. So I'd like to just kind of take an opportunity to remind, everybody who's listening or watching with us that there is no definitive test for being burned out. There's no definitive list of symptoms, and that is you, and you are burned out. Or if you don't burn out in this way, or you don't present in that way, you're not autistic enough, or you can't be burnt out, or so on and so forth. We often say that autism in itself is just an abstract concept, it does not exist. And people hear that and they go, oh my Lord, what do you mean? Well, you can't, there's no blood test, there's no x-ray for it. You can't like scan and see it in the body. It's something that has been named via observation, and there's a lot of power imbalance and medicalization and things involved in that. So actually the only thing that exists is autistic people. And I think with the advent of the internet and so on and so forth, what that actually means is changing and evolving and so on. So I think that's why it was important that we covered neurodivergent burnout, because we can't sit here and say that's autism, that's not autism, that's ADHD, that's not ADHD, that's this, that's that. What we can say though is autism is an abstract concept. There is no definitive test for it. And actually, the only thing that do exist is autistic people. So I hope that kind of helps, And we sit here and we're like, oh, we experts. Well, I hate that word, but the more you know, the more you learn that you don't know. And actually, it's autistic people and autistic community that are shaping the knowledge base. Like when we study things like burnout, all of that knowledge comes from the autistic community. And then you got some privileged academic person who comes along, sticks a donk on it in an academic way, and all of a sudden it's now a legitimized thing. Like somebody needed to translate it into a different language for it to be legitimized. Um, so yeah, there is no right or wrong way to be autistic, to be burned out, to present, to live. And I think the important thing, I think for me and David, when I talk about my work around like meerkat mode, monotropic split, psychosis, I think my perspective as an academic, as a researcher, as a practitioner, as an autistic person, actually, after all these years, has actually moved more towards the importance of community connectedness and story sharing and how that moves kind of discourse and knowledge and the actual view of things along. I realise I've just info dumped you for about 5 whole minutes,
But,
David.
but I'm really glad you mentioned community connection because for me, a lot of my writing recently, when I'm talking about burnout, I'm talking about it as a crisis of connection. The fact
Mm.
that whether you're autistic or not autistic, if you're experiencing burnout, it's that gradual disconnection from everything, from yourself, from your sensations and feelings and emotions. It's your disconnection.
And it then becomes the avoidance. It then becomes the willful disconnection because you
Yeah.
cannot take any more information in. You cannot absorb any more environment.
And
Um,
for me, for people like me who experience psychosis, it gets to a point where
mm,
you even become disconnected from reality.
mm, yeah. I mean, it's commonly known, as chronic exhaustion, change in your sensory sensitivities, you may, a lot of the time it's thought to look a lot like depression, but a lot of the time for people that might have an ADHD experience as well, that might not be the case. So while, it can mean more meltdowns, shutdowns, your executive functioning can get worse. For me, I can become quite anxious. I can um, struggle even more with like word finding and working memory and stuff like that. And it's all about basically exceeding your capacity to cope. And it fits really well with monotropism, if you know about monotropism as a theory, which I'm sure we'll touch on at some point. But, I mean, I've just had a quick look. So, social and sensory, withdrawal from social situations, increased sensory differences, um, more changes within your presentation, anxiety, panic, mood swings, cognitive impacts, physical chronic fatigue. It can be all of those things, but it basically means you've been operating in too high a gear for too long. And the body mind is just saying no, really. Like this is not sustainable.
Concept
Um,
of cat mode, a monotropic spiral that you
mm,
conceptualized, it came a lot from observing burnt out ADHDers who were almost manic when they were burnt out. It wasn't that depressive, take to your bed for 6 weeks
yeah,
kind
and you often see it in school children. That's where it came from for me. I spent a lot of years doing a lot of work in kind of like education advocacy. So I was privileged enough really and still now, it's still in my role now. I do a lot of school stuff. Um, but we only really, I mean, there's so many problems with an observational model, and we understand, why we have to use that. But meerkat mode really came for me because actually, when I was seeing kids, like not every child has attendance difficulties. They keep wanting to go to school, even though the entire kind of like environment is breaking them because that's what they should do, and it increases interoceptive difficulties. So they weren't feeling burned out, but they were feeling manic. They weren't regulated. Their behavior would be impulsive and so on. And I was just like, yeah, this is still burnout to me. So I tend to not think of burnout as a tick box exercise of whether or not you're burned out. And I tend to think as burnout as a vehicle that carries us into a crisis scenario. Like this is what is happening to you that has arrived, which means you've arrived in a crisis. Um, and I think that's just more accurate for me.
And this, for me, it raises that point that burnout is a deeply personal experience. And
Hmm.
please do, if you're watching, weigh in with your own thoughts, what burnout means to you. We're keen to, spur the discussion on, with what you have to say about burnout as well. But
Mm.
I know for me, burnout, the vehicle into crisis idea, that's really accurate for me because as a schizophrenic man, I'm multiply neurodivergent, I'm autistic, I'm ADHD, I'm schizophrenic. And when I experience burnout, it carries me into a state of
Yeah.
crisis that at times has landed me in psychiatric hospitals. It's landed me under crisis teams. It's got me to the point where I can't differentiate between what's real and not real anymore
Mm. Mm.
because burnout for me has disconnected me so violently from the world around me that I just can't make sense of it anymore. But I don't look like I'm depressed necessarily. If anything, I am paranoid, I am on edge, I am hyper vigilant because my brain, in its attempt to find that flow state, something to hyper focus on, is inventing this wild conspiracy land that it's just getting pulled into more and more.
Yeah. So, and I think that we do see this in burnout a lot. Like there's like a massive kind of undertone of avoidance that comes with burnout as well. Avoidance of social stuff, avoidance of like responsibilities. It comes a lot of demand avoidance, but also avoidance of one's own introspection, whether it be hunger, whether it be needing to pee or um but yeah, avoidance of emotions, avoidance. And I think that quite often the brain can spiral on this kind of fixation of avoidance, or if I need to latch on to something so that I can disassociate from what is my reality as well. And I think, we are, you know, hyperfocus or monotropic flow, whatever you decide to call it, is one of the most wonderful experiences when it is positive. But to say that it's always positive is not accurate. And this is why I love. I think it was me that said to you, none of this is positive or negative. It's just aggressively neutral.
Yeah.
Because there are pluses and minuses to each thing. But again, and actually, I would say that every single time that I've burned out, it's been different. It's been different, and that's been reflected in what's going on for me personally with my health, in my environment, what kind of pressure I'm under, what responsibilities I have, what help I have, because I'm a parent. So, and my both of my children are multiply neurodivergent and need a lot of support. I can't stop. I don't get that. I can't. It doesn't like that's not an option for me. Um, So actually, it struck me, and neither can the children, when I go back to the children that we see with the meerkat mode, and neither can the children, and neither can a lot of functioning, semi-functioning adults, or even if it's driven by masking in order to keep safe. We're not saying that different kind of burnouts only happen for different kind of people, but whatever if you're driven to mask as a safety mechanism, then you're not going to stop doing the things that you were doing. And there's so much kind of inside of it. And that's why I really don't like the definitive checklists for burnout, you
Mm.
know. And that might be helpful for you. It's always take what works and leave what doesn't. But if you feel like you have too much on your plate, you are noticing that you are avoidant. You are noticing that you just don't want to feel. You are noticing that you just want to zone out all of the time, then the chances are you are heading towards burnout or are in burnout. You know, the avoidance really is the only thing that I can say that is a definitive sign, I think. And that's
Mm.
not me. And I would never speak in absolutes in that way. So that's probably because I've just not seen any other kind of version.
And something that I'd like to get into, I talked about this because I have another podcast, Autistic Storytime with David, and I do like short 10-minute things. One of the topics I talked about on there was burnout as transformation. Now, it sounds weird to say that, but for me, burnout is transformative. Now,
Yeah.
firstly, something doesn't have to be entirely positive to be transformative. Bad things can transform us.
And actually, I think adversity makes the best changes sometimes.
Yeah,
And I
and
don't want to like toxic positivity things, but it's that fine balance, isn't it? It's always that fine balance between adversity and not breaking.
but what that experience does for me is it teaches me what is not working for me, what is not sustainable. Burnout is kind of like when my body goes, "You've not made the changes to your lifestyle you need to make, so now I'm going to make you do it." And it
Mm.
burnout is a horrible experience, and the things I go through when I'm burnt out are so soul crushing. But when I rehabilitate and come out the other side, because I don't like the word recovery because it makes it sound like
We
you're going
don't
back to
do
where you came
recovery.
from.
It's yeah, recovery is it's not right. We don't
Yeah.
recover. Like when you break a leg, you know, you recover because your leg becomes unbroken. You're not breaking. There's nothing to recover from. It's just that you've been forced to function in a way that is not compatible with yourself.
And as a recovering addict, I think of it more like rehabilitation because
Mm.
in addiction, you don't go back to who you were before the addiction because that's what led
Because
you
then
to
you'll
the
be an
addiction.
addict
Yeah.
again.
So what you
Yeah.
do is you rehabilitate and you design a life where you're able to not use. And in the same way with burnout, I don't go back to the person who entered burnout. I become a new person who's living a more sustainable life that I am able to perhaps not burn out as easily or as often.
And I think what we need to kind of honor in that conversation as well. I mean, we can sit here as like I always say elder auties because even though we're not old, David. No, we really are now. We're like 10 over 10 years in, but you know, and what I mean by elder autis is like people who've been soaked in the information for a long time. You know, we can sit here as elder autis going, yeah, you don't want to go back to that and blah, blah, blah. And that's really crap. But there's an element of grief that comes with that because I don't know about you, but for a lot of the burned out people that I work with, when we're looking at that rehabilitation and that kind of, you know, sampling of like what the new normal is, they are so driven to actually, well, tell me what I need to do to get back to this, to get back to that, to get back to that. And you have to grieve and come to terms with the fact that you are disabled and being disabled is disabling, you
I'm
know?
glad we got to this point because we've just had a question from the audience. So
Mhm.
Emily asks, what do we do about burnout? I keep ending up in crisis every few months due to burnout, but I'm essentially the sole carer for my two autistic children, 17 and 20. Because my daughter especially needs so much support, I can't turn around and say, Mummy needs a rest today. I still have to get up and support my family. How do I stop this cycle of burnout? Now, before Tanya answers, because I know Tanya will have a lot to say on this question, it's not like a simple guide or, do this, then this, then this. But there are perhaps some adjustments that can be made that can help. And Tanya, do you want to kind of take it
Yeah,
away?
and first and foremost, I'm going to do my blunt autistic thing, right? And as hard as it is, fundamentally, if your output is more than you can sustain, you will perpetuate that cycle. Um, and that's just it. That's it. You know, um, there it has to be where it's resolved legally. It has to be where we go through EHCP processes in England, for example, or social care processes. It has to do that, especially as adults as well. Like they're adults. It's so There is no perfect cure for burnout. There's just not. And parenting, David and I are both trustees and board members at Autistic Parents UK, which is a national charity. Parenting for me is probably one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do as an autistic person, ever. Take me to work. Like Christmas, what did I say to you, David? I was like, oh man, and you were like, I can feel the monotropic split from here. And I was like, literally, take me to work, put me in front of a judge and make me argue. I don't care. Just take me to the black and white where everything is simple and I can just, you know? Um, but you fundamentally have to look at, because I think as well, we can get ourselves, especially as like, if you're assigned female at birth, if you're a mother, there's a lot of mum guilt. Um, we really sometimes have to have a look at our circle of control. Um, in social care, for example, it can be, especially when your children are disabled, like how much do you need to do for them? Is there a way of promoting independent? It can be really difficult. Like there's so many layers. Um, but actually at 17 and 20, your children are adults and you're not going to be there forever, and it's really difficult. So if you have spoons, my advice would be to start moving towards more independence now. Because independence doesn't always look like not being cared for. It just changes in who's doing the caring.
Yeah, because I was going to say, in terms of independence, obviously we recognize that not every autistic person is going to
But it's
be,
what does independence mean? And for
yeah.
me, independence means that kind of autonomy and having that autonomy over your own care as well. And it's really difficult. Like there is no, well, we can say that you need to ultimately it's an output and input issue. Um, there are no sticking plasters really for it.
I mean, the starting place I always come from, because obviously I run the Mindfully Divergent program, which is
Hmm.
sort of centered around mindful living. And the starting place I always come from when members of that group are talking about burnout and struggling with their capacity is that circles of control that you talked about. So you have your inner circle, which is things you have control over. You have the next circle out, which is things you can't control, but you have influence over. You then have a third circle out, which is things you can neither control nor influence. Now, if things can be neither controlled or influenced, we shouldn't be spending our cognitive resources on it. If we can influence it, then if it's necessary, spend energy on it. If you can have direct control over it, spend energy on it. But if you're burnt out, again, you got to run it through that isn't necessary thing. Because I find one of the traps that I get caught in as an autistic parent is telling myself I have to do everything when actually not everything is necessary. Not everything is in my control. And a lot of stuff is neither in my control nor influence. But as autistic people, we've spent so much of our lives being told, do this a different way, do that a different way, you're doing that wrong, that we start to think we have to be in control of absolutely everything, but it's simply impossible. And so I guess that kind of feeds back to what you're saying, Tanya,
Yeah, I
about,
was literally about to say that, David. Like one of the things that I had to learn about through my own burnouts and difficulties really was to, when we talk about that spiraling, we talk about that fixating. Actually, when we talk about meerkat mode, that needing to be up in some sort of crisis to keep going and going and going and then rushing and crashing and rushing and crashing, your brain can play a lot of tricks on you where it will make you think that what would be a level 3 anxiety is actually a level 7 anxiety if you don't sort of resolve it all. Do you know what I mean? And we can get to the point where actually it becomes almost impossible for us to tolerate our children's discomfort or what change or what they're used to because it feels so personal to us. Does that make sense, David? And we can get into that kind of meerkatting kind of cycle of we have to control everything. We have to be responsible for everybody's feelings and emotions. We have to, it's all on us and it's just going to be more difficult. when actually I think I had to learn to relax my nervous system an awful lot. And that sounds like it's something that you can do as an neurodivergent. Do you know what I mean? But I had to learn what is mine and what is not mine.
One of the challenges, of course, is when we try and control everything, when we try and, uh, you know, take responsibility for everything, we take it personally when it goes wrong.
Mhm.
Because I know one of the challenges I have is when I kind of get in that meerkatty sense of being and I'm hyper vigilant and I'm trying to be in control of everything. If something goes wrong, it feels deeply personal and it affects me far more than it would if I'd maintained a boundary around it.
And also, if you position yourself as the person that is taking responsibility and being in control of everything, then other people are going to look at you that if it doesn't go right, then it's their, like, it's your responsibility when it's not necessarily, if that makes sense, you know? And I see it so often in families where, you know, and it's usually mum that gets, I always say, stuck at the top of the co-regulation tree, responsible for co-regulating everybody. But actually, a lot of the time, these children are adults, and you just go, okay, you don't need to fix that. You can just let it learn. Do you know what I mean? But we can as well, we've got to remember inertia here as well. We've got to remember the difficulty changing speeds. So if you're used to living life at a 10, you will find reasons to stay at that 10 because what you know and the speed that you're running at is a lot more familiar than trying to slow down.
Yeah, I mean, in simple terms, I think the way we've described it before
Mhm.
is that when you get to a certain level of burnout, it's um, you don't feel safe when you feel safe, which sounds
Mhm.
paradoxical, but it gets to that point where the feeling of things being safe no longer feels safe, so we look for reasons to not feel safe. Um,
Mhm.
Emily has weighed in saying, I do think that needing to be in control is a trauma response. We're told this is how we should be, and we can't meet the expectations, and we are terrified of being told off for getting it wrong. It comes from school, my parents, my husband, and professionals. I always feel like they're telling me it's my fault. Although I think I'm finally getting the right support from my daughter after fighting for so many years. And one of the things I would say is, sometimes it's about shedding those internalized attitudes that other people have forced onto us because
So be
humans
told off.
yeah,
Honestly, I am a liability in any room sometimes. We never know when a swear bomb is going to drop out of my mouth, or I'm going to say the thing that I just thought is an avalanche thought. And I still sometimes really struggle with imposter syndrome, especially like academically, because I'm just a bit of a gobshite that left school at 14 with no GCSEs and grew up on a council estate or was dragged up on a council estate. Do you know what I mean? So I never really felt comfortable in academic circles. And funnily enough, when I went to university, I thought I'd be judged on my academic ability, not my accent. But it turns out the opposite is true. But you know what? I think the thing about being autistic, right? And I learned this very early on about masking, right? I was like, great, I've found a community. Yay. I'm gonna like find people that are like me and we're just gonna like intrinsically know each other inside and out. And actually, no, 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 no. The thing that we all have in common is that none of us feel like we fit anywhere. And we may have little things in common, like, oh, I do this when I burn out, or I do that when I burn out, or I do all the, do you know what I mean? But actually, I think embracing like the neurodiversity paradigm, embracing autistic identity is being comfortable with the uncomfortable and knowing that is who you are. You are uncomfortable within society, and that's okay. Um, but there are other people who are uncomfortable as well, if that makes sense. But yeah, um, and you know what? Tell me off.
yeah,
Tell me off. If people want to tell you off or have judgments about what you should do and what you should be, and this is a real kind of number as well. You know, life does a real bloody number on us because, you know, Interoception, the ability to feel on the inside. It's nature and it's nurture. I can remember Kelly asking me that with a little test, our colleague, Kelly Marler. Is it nature or is it nurture? So the ability to feel on the inside, right? It could be hunger first, whatever, but it's also feelings, emotions, values, ethics, who you are, your identity. And if you're always kind of repositioning your identity of what others' expectations are, or what those expectations are of you, then you're never going to develop your own identity, which means you're going to be perpetually anxious. Ultimately, right? Why are you might be terrified of being told off, but as long as you know that you've done what you need to, like if we live our life for other people, those are impossible targets to hit because they're constantly moving.
I want to take a moment to acknowledge how difficult
Mm.
this is because it's something I teach in my mindfulness work, but it's something I still struggle with myself. When
Mm.
you think back to that circle of control, one of the things that we can neither control and really not influence much is the reaction of others. Other people are going to have the reactions they do. Other people are going to say the same shitty
And
thing.
when you start putting boundaries in place with other people, that's when they kick back even more.
And one of the
Um,
things I practice, and it's so difficult because I still can't, I'd say I get it right maybe
so
30% of the
yeah, me
time.
and David are like 10 years plus down the line, and I still like, society is designed to put us down because when we are down, we are easy to control.
But I have found so much that when I allow myself to internalize every nasty thing or criticism or thing that is said to me, it creates like that monotropic split because I'm constantly trying to perform what I need to do, but also trying to do it in a way that pleases the people who criticize me. And because I'm not just getting on with what I need to do, I'm running this comparison at the same time. I can't achieve either.
And
Uh,
also, we don't take criticisms for people who are not respectable in that way. Now, I'm not saying that, the school, your partner, this, are they doing what you're doing? Let's take that criticism with a pinch of salt then. Are they capable of doing what you're doing? Let's take that. Are they living your truth? No. Um, I always say to people that I work with that 95% of somebody's interaction with you or response to you is not you. It's their personal experiences, it's their projections, it's their finding somebody to blame, it's their deflection, you know, it's their things that they're triggered about and their reality and their personal stuff. And actually, if the sky isn't falling in and everybody is well, and I think it's really about defining what is your okay. So instead of grasping outwards and going, right, oh Lord, I need to, you know, I mean, just for me, for example, I always laugh about this. Like, it's impossible. So, like, I'm a woman, I identify as a woman, but like, you know, I'm supposed to be a cook, a cleaner, a counselor, a maid, an academic. I'm supposed to have a career. I'm supposed to be an independent woman. I'm supposed to travel the world. I'm supposed to bake cookies. I'm supposed to do all these things. Name me. Like, how is that even bloody possible? None of this is possible. So, what is your okay? What is other people's okay? And maybe when you start listening to other people's experience of what that is, you'll realize that you're trying to hit something that's impossible to achieve. And if everybody is alive and everybody is safe and everybody has their basic care needs met, you've ticked every box that you need to tick.
yeah, and they've weighed in saying that they understand all this intellectually, but really struggle with the emotional response. They have big panic attacks if they have to say no to someone, and they don't know how to live with the big emotions. How am I supposed to help my son with the same issue if I can't do it myself? I've got something to say there, which is there's a lot of things I'm really not good at doing myself. Um, but I know how to help other people with them because I'm better at helping other people than I am myself. And I had to get comfortable with being a hypocrite. We're taught that being hypocritical is this terrible thing that we shouldn't be. But actually, 9 times out of 10, I can help you with your emotions better than I can deal with my own. I can have such what we'd call childish reactions and become really dysregulated really easily. But I'm really good at helping other people regulate. So I've had to come to a place of saying, you know what? I'm kind of a mess in my own life. But as Tanya said, everyone's fed, they're alive, no one's injured. And one of the things that I've had to learn to do is to just stop trying to live to the standards of people who aren't me, because everyone has an opinion on how things should be done, or whether I've done things in the correct way, or if I've done things to the correct standard. But one thing I learned that burns me out quicker than anything else is trying to meet everyone else's standard.
Trying to control things you can't control.
Yeah. And so for me,
No
part of
end to it.
avoiding,
There's no
yeah.
solution.
And so for me, part of not burning out constantly is just going, do you know what? People are going to be hacked off with me. Um,
And
but
this, this is not burnout. This is not doing too much. This is a trauma response to resting, to stopping, to, putting yourself first, self-worth. This is trauma,
it's
you
so
know?
common in
And
autistic
it's
people as
common.
well.
Yeah, it's like so common. Like I've had to work through it. David's had to work through it. Um, Therapy is a huge one. Um, it's really hard. It's really hard. Um, because the thing is, you can't cure burnout because it's a perfectly functional reaction to a situation that you're in. So what we have to do is avoid following those same paths. And it can be really minor. It can be really minor and I don't want to say that like I'm sitting here like I'm a perfect person all the time. Like I am so critical of myself, it's unreal. Like I am really working hard not to be. Um, but yeah, it's even like, when we're mentoring people, like some of the homework that I've given people is to just say no, thank you 3 times a week, you know, and just start on those really mini things, or just let silence happen where you don't feel like you need to fill that gap.
But I can really relate to, what Emily said there about the emotional response to saying no, because I mean, I've been working, Tanya, you've worked with me for
Mm.
years. I've been working on this for a long time. I still have a visceral reaction to saying no. And it is directly linked to autistic and neurodivergent burnout, because one of the most common experiences for us as neurodivergent people is that we've internalized this feeling that we have to say yes to everyone, we have to please everyone, we can't say no. And it's drilled into us from like the earliest age.
Mm.
This constant, so many of us fawn because we've been taught, our brains feel it's the only way to stay safe. So we say yes to
Even
everyone.
when you go through the therapy, it's not we do something at me and I sit in therapy and then all of a sudden I'm cured. The real work happens outside. The real work is, when you start with boundaries, it can be so small. Taking that extra 30 seconds before you respond to somebody, I mean, that's really important. I did that with my children because, like, one of my youngest was completely intolerant of being left alone. So I would find excuses. Oh, I need to go and do this job. I need to go and do that job. Just so I could extend that time because I was very aware that I was creating this situation where I had to be constantly on and tuned into them. Because if I was constantly on and tuned into them, I wasn't tuned into myself. But the practice happens on the outside of, like therapy or mentoring and stuff like that. It's like even now, like talking about money is really hard. I don't know about you, David, but that's one of like we really both really struggle. You tell me off for it and I tell you off for it. You should charge more or I should do you know what I mean? And all that stuff. Or like, we have those conversations. Are you doing too much? Or is this person been in your environment too much? Or are you okay? Or like you like when you were saying you were having a really hard time the other day, I was like, yeah, but do you have symptoms of anything? You know? And it's that kind of accountability constant. So I'm not saying that all of a sudden you're going to learn all the information about being a neurodivergent person from the neurodivergent community and then you're going to never experience this stuff again. It is a constant battle and keeping it within your kind of frame of reference, if you like, via your environment to prioritize things that you need to remember.
Do you know what? I want to circle back for a minute though to
Mhm.
therapy because I have an anecdote here. I always have an anecdote.
Yeah.
So I've literally had therapy around my chronic people pleasing and saying yes. One of the challenges was though in the therapy, I just continued the chronic people pleasing. So the therapist thought they were being way more effective than they were because they'd be like, "Is that helpful?" I'd be like, "Yeah," even though it was absolutely not. But I didn't want to upset them by saying no. So I went through the therapy and I was still people pleasing. So I didn't learn how to not people please because I kept people pleasing the therapist.
I mean, I've done like the CBT stuff. It didn't work for me. Anything that involves the workbook doesn't work for me. My brain just is not driven that way. It just doesn't. Psychotherapy has been really helpful, but I think it's about finding the right therapist. Inner child stuff, because the thing is, right? And I remember doing some training for a clinical excellence network of SLTs up here, and they got me to come and talk about neurodivergence and trauma, and all these SLTs, speech and language therapists, thought that I was going to sit there and tell them how to differentiate between autism and trauma. Ah, psych, because you can't. What's
No,
this and what's that? You know? Um, and it's really difficult because like and actually, you got to remember that like autism has a really high heritability and being autistic or neurodivergent in a world that's not designed for you is inherently traumatizing, and it would have been traumatizing for your mother or father and their parents and their parents and their parents, and the cycle continues. So you have to actively decide to break it, I think. And it's hard. It's really hard. But I guess the fact that you know this, so there's knowing and knowing. I always think there's knowing on an intellectual level, then there's knowing on a nervous system level. There's knowing on a like an almost spiritual self level, in an unconscious level. And intellectually, we're often intellectualizers. We're constantly keeping one step ahead. That's what keeps us safe, right? But for me, like nervous system wise and self wise, it takes a while of sitting in the intellectual for my nervous system to then catch up. So what I would say is, as frustrating as it is, because you want to know what boxes you've got to tick so that you can fix it all, the fact that you're here and researching and immersing yourself in this stuff and listening to it and resonating and doing all that, I would say that you're on the way to
you're
updating
already
your nervous
making the right
system.
choices
Yeah.
because it's a journey. It's not a process. It's
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
a journey.
It's not,
Um,
I'm going to learn all this stuff in therapy and then boom, I'm going to be fixed. And that's,
and
it
part of
doesn't.
my burnout journey really was learning the power of saying no, but not to other people, to myself. Because you know what, for all the demands that other people put on me, I put 10 times more demands on myself.
Hmm.
Because I've internalized this idea that I have to be productive and a good parent and on the ball 100% of the time. But I think I saw it online once. It was like a meme on Facebook, and someone had posted something saying, the Starship Enterprise from Star Trek was capable of traveling at warp 9, but if it traveled at warp 9 all the time, its engines would explode. Well, I expect myself to travel at warp 9 100% of the time. So I constantly find demands for myself.
And that's what we were talking about, that staying in that meerkat mode.
Yeah,
When we've experienced trauma, when we don't feel safe, when our blueprint for existing is not safe, we have to find ways to keep hypervigilant so that we can anticipate problems before they turn up. We can catch balls that haven't even been thrown yet. We can see 3 days in front. If such and such doesn't get this right now, then when they get back there, you know, and that is what I was talking about, where we're taking responsibility for things that we haven't even experienced yet or haven't come to fruition. And it can, especially, it's so easy to do, especially as a parent, and not distracting from your kind of experiences, David, but especially as a mother and a woman.
Mm.
It
No, I
is,
100% agree.
there are
And
more reasons for us to feed that. We've got to do this, we've got to do that, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, we've got to do this, we've got to do that.
broadly, this is why I trained to deliver mindfulness
Mm.
because, and it's why I've been spending so much time over the last few months trying to adapt mindfulness for a neurodivergent cohort in the Mindfully Divergent program because part of that is practicing that self-awareness. And as neurodivergent people, we're kind of taught to stop being aware of what's going on internally. And I think that may even feed into like our interoceptive differences. We're
It
taught to
does. That's
ignore
the
what
nature and
feels true to
nurture.
us.
Mm.
Um, and part of what I try to do with the mindful living stuff that I do with people, and even for myself as a personal practice, because it is helpful, is practicing that self-awareness of when I am creating demands for myself, when I am preventing myself from stopping. And it's a really uncomfortable conversation to have because it's not that we are 100% responsible for our own problems. It's that so many other people have made us internalize this feeling that we're not allowed to stop, we're not allowed to say no, that our brain just keeps creating things to say yes to or creating
And
feelings.
there becomes a fear of stopping because you fear that if you stop, then you won't start again.
Yeah.
And as a mother, when you have people relying on you, that is one of the strongest motivators for
One of the
atypical
things I
burnout.
have learned, and actually I learned it this summer because I will happily admit this summer I burnt out. You know, I'm sure you remember, Tanya.
Hmm.
I crashed and burned, and I had a full-blown psychotic episode. I was under a crisis team for weeks, and then I was under a discharge team, and then I was referred to social care. Like I crashed and burned. I felt like my life was ruined. But when you stop and allow yourself to find yourself again and create something more sustainable, you do start up again. So that feeling that if you stop, you won't start, it's kind of it feeds into that when you're in distress, it
It's
feels like that's
fear
how
of
you're
the
going to feel
unknown.
forever.
What
Yeah.
that is fear of the unknown.
But these
That's
things,
fear of the unknown.
one thing I've learned from these experiences is that everything is temporary. So even if something feels uncomfortable at first, even if something feels like you shouldn't be doing it, for me, learning to say no gets easier every time I do it because that
And I
feeling of
also,
negativity
yeah.
is
And I
temporary.
also, for me, like one of the most useful things, um, about when you allow yourself to set a few boundaries. And I'm not saying we should all of a sudden be experts at saying no. Like we're not going to go from, 100% fawn to 100% like hell no, but when you allow yourself to start feeling out those boundaries, if you try to do something new, it is going to feel weird and uncomfortable. It's like anything, right? Anything that you do is going to feel clunky. We don't have scripts for that. We don't know what the reaction's going to be. Why are we scared of reactions? So what helps for me, I don't know about you, David, and people will go, "Oh my God, you're a pessimist," right? No, I'm not. I'm a realist. What is the consequence of me saying no? What is the consequence of said action? What is the worst case scenario that can actually happen? And actually, I've probably lived through easier, you know?
One thing I've learned for myself is that 99% of the time, someone will offer me a potential start to a solution or a solution. My brain immediately goes, "There's no way that'll work. I can't do it." Because my brain is still creating demands for me and trying to keep me on that
Because what your
elevated
brain does
state.
is find a million reasons why it won't work.
Because otherwise, if it
That
did
avoidance.
work, I wouldn't be in that elevated state anymore. And I have learned that that is the only way to be. And so one of the things I've had to learn to do is when my brain goes, "This won't work," go, actually, maybe it might.
And actually, I think it's for me, one of the things that's been really important is cultivating my community for that. Because I've had to learn, like I said earlier, to not take people's opinions on board. However, that's a bit of a double-edged sword because then when people say, oh, blah, 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 have you tried this? I'm like, "Pfft." Do you know, my automatic default is I am not taking your opinion on board.
I'm
Um,
open-minded, but I am boundaried.
yeah. So I think cultivating your community of people you trust and you go, hang on a minute, do I trust this person's knowledge, opinion, etc., etc.? Then this is probably a demand avoidance response because actually my nervous system doesn't want to settle down.
Yeah, because one of the things that people hear demand avoidance, they immediately jump to PDA. But when neurodivergent people are burned out, we are super demand avoidant.
Demand avoidance is completely logical.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got heightened sensory sensitivities, if you feel like you are responsible for the weight of the world, like I can't stand, like, I'm like, am I PDA? Am I not PDA? Again, abstract concept, who knows? Um, But for me, dry begging, even the thought of like somebody trying to place demands like salesmen, right? Salesmen, friggin' hate them. Huge demand because you're expecting me to fulfill this role with you, and I'm just not going to do it. I find it's like intellect, it's like almost nervous system bullying. Do you know what I mean? All of those things, like demand avoidance, is 100% logical when your brain is on fire, you know?
We've just had another comment in the chat. My daughter is PDA, and I have learned that if I say no and she's in a heightened state, things will get worse. There are times I can say no and she will accept it, but it doesn't always work. Her dad is the same. Saying no often ends up with kickbacks, and my logical mind says just say yes because it will be less of a struggle. But it's those times I'm exhausted. I end up in a catch-22. I can't win. My approach to these situations, because I go through similar with my child um, is the pick your battles approach. So I go through those circles of control again thing, and kind of, but come back to that, is it necessary question. So if saying no is necessary, then I say no and I deal with the consequences. But if saying no is going to cause me to waste cognitive resources on a situation that I don't need to waste resources on, then I pick my battle and go, do you know what? In this situation, I'm just going to go with the
But
flow.
equally, and I've seen this play out a lot as well, and I've got one of my kids is identified PDA and the other one definitely is, so high maintenance. Um, and this is going to set like I've been through this. They almost get into the habit of heightening themselves because it works sometimes, if that makes sense. A bit like we turn around, we say that we keep ourselves heightened, but equally, if you say no to them and they learn that heightening themselves resolves the issue and they need to become anxious in order to resolve that, then it can just turn into this real kind of co-dysregulatory mess. And
Sometimes it's about saying no and demonstrating that things are still okay.
mhm.
Is that
And sometimes
co-regulation?
it's about not fearing the meltdown. Now, I don't know what your specific ins and outs are, but you know, we're autistic. Autistic people have meltdowns. Autistic people struggle with things. When I shifted, and I try and keep this personal, so I'm not like disclosing any anecdotes professionally, but when we shift from being terrified of the meltdown and being responsible for the dysregulation to actually, you are disabled, dysregulation, meltdowns are going to happen. How do we focus on the repair? It takes a lot of the pressure off, and I hope that makes sense.
It actually fits in broader as well to work I've been doing in my writing recently about
Mm.
this ecosystemic model, because you can address a person's personal needs, you can address the immediate environment. There are still going to be factors that are going to cause distress. You can't you can't fix every single problem that could lead to a meltdown or a state of distress.
If
There are
we've got
things outside
autistic
of our control.
children, yeah, if we've got autistic children, they're autistic. They're going to experience distress. They're going to experience meltdowns. And if we're trying to do things to stop that, we're just going to burn ourselves out.
Mm.
So my parenting had to shift to how do we melt down? What do we need when we melt down? What makes us feel better? How can I help them learn things that makes them feel good? And this was one of, even like in my own burnout stuff, one of the most powerful things was learning what I needed to recover, for example. And that was a really hard thing because people go, "Oh, you're really ill. What do you need?" And I'd be like, do you know what I mean? Or you've had a really hard time. And I just completely dismiss my own feelings. Oh, no, it weren't that bad. Oh, no, it's not this. Do you know what I mean? And then just carry on and carry on and carry on. But the slowing down for me, I've had to learn what I need. And I think shifting my kind of perspective, um, more therapeutically aligned with my children has stopped me feeling wholly responsible for their experience. I'm with them, I'm not enmeshed in it, if that makes sense. Unfortunately, we can't stop all of our children's distress. We can't. Like, your little one is going to have bugs and broken bones and meltdowns and difficulties at school. And you know what? That's a really sad, awful thing, and we can't stop that.
I do keep my fingers crossed it's not all at the same time because that would just be too much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Ugh.
we can't save, and nor should we. We're not there to rescue. We're there to accompany and guide and so on. Um, and that's really hard because you just wanna save your kids from any form of discomfort that they're ever going to feel ever. But that is an impossible standard. And actually, what we do when we get into that trap is we make them not resilient, and we can switch into permissive parenting then, and that's really dangerous.
I
Because
think
mm,
I think you know we do have to learn to embrace the fact that our children are going to experience discomfort, and there is nothing we can do to stop that. It's something that really upsets me as a parent, but it's something that I am working on accepting personally. At the
but
end of the day,
equally as well, like, why am I avoiding that upset as a parent? I'm upset that they're upset. That's parenting. Parenting is hard.
very hard.
And if you're not worrying that you're not a good enough parent, then you're not parenting right. Let me tell you, because
I've
that's
not
it.
met a good parent yet who every good parent I've met tells me they're burned out, they're not sure they're doing it right, they feel like they're doing a rubbish job. Well, actually, 9 times out of ten, when I hear someone saying that, they are doing a really good job. Because with parenting, if you I think you said if you get it right 50% of the time, you're doing better than most
Yeah,
people.
I mean, I work in social work, and we do a lot of court parenting work for really awful situations. Um, and again, I think take what works and leave what doesn't. But therapeutic parenting was a revelation for me. And I'm not saying all of it works for every neurodivergent child, or even every child, or every traumatized child. But actually, it's what's theirs and what's yours. And I find it really useful. And actually, you can go on YouTube and they'll give you like literal scenarios, and you can watch people role play, and you can develop scripts and stuff like that. Pace is a really good model. Um, but it's a real
Playfulness, acceptance,
catch.
curiosity, and empathy.
Yeah, but it's a real catch 22 because you have to have your boundaries. And if you need to walk away, walk away. As long as
Well,
everybody's safe, that's okay.
well, we've we kind of went off on a tangent this evening
Yeah.
into parenting, but I'm glad we did because I think parenting is
It's one of the biggest causes of burnout.
it is, and I think sometimes we're not able to be honest about that because we part of being a parent is that feeling that you have to be perceived as getting it right every single time. But no, we burn out. It gets
I mean,
messy.
David, my whole concept of monotropic split came from parenting. Like, I
Exactly.
looked at inertia and I was like, oh, they're saying that we can't divide our attention. Well, that's wrong because we have to when we parent, you know?
But I guess to summarize, because I know we're getting close to when we have to come to a close.
Mm.
When it comes to any burnout, really, part of that journey is looking at the expectations we're placing on ourselves, because the world will burn us out, but we also place unrealistic expectations on ourselves because as neurodivergent people, we have been taught that who we are is not enough for most of our life, or it's not right. So we internalize that and constantly feel like we have to do more. Oh, we've had a comment come in. Hi, I'm ADHD, and since 3 months going through a burnout, I have a 6-week-old baby, and my time it's almost fully dedicated to taking care of her. I'm facing
Yes.
intense
Yeah.
discomfort and
Yeah. I
sensory
mean,
overstimulation.
I'm going to speak on this, especially if there's breastfeeding involved. Like you are glued to this baby 24/7. You have this child and you expect that all of a sudden there's the heavens going to open and all of a sudden that you're going to be have all this knowledge and there's so much worry. And the only thing that I can say that it felt like something was plugged into the back of my head. Um, I think accept the fact that this is hard. Um, definitely routine. Routine helped. Now, if you try and force a routine on a baby, it's going to go wrong, right? But if you can get into the swing of things, learn to move slower, divide your days up, at this time we have breakfast, at this time we do this, at this time we do that. Because if you're working on routine, then you're not stressing out like your executive function. Um, there is definitely an an acceptance of it, and it is hard. Um, yeah, yeah. Get help where you can if there's any family or anything.
One thing I will say from my own experience is there is no failure in admitting you're struggling. It's okay to say this is really hard and I'm struggling. That does not make you a bad parent because any parent who is being honest, especially with a young baby, if they're being honest, they will tell you that they struggled because we all
And yeah, I don't know if you're UK based. Find other autistic parents. What you are experiencing is devastating. It's awful. Because you're autistic as well, they'll just be like, oh, this is postnatal depression. Not necessarily. Now, I'm not saying that burnout can't lead to depression or they can't co-occur, but there's often a misdiagnosis. I think every parent um, who works for or is a volunteer of Autistic Parents UK has experienced this, you know?
and I
Um,
want to add an addendum here as well as a father because I
mm,
didn't know this could happen. I was diagnosed with postnatal depression after my son was born.
burnout.
Yeah.
Because all of
Um,
a sudden, mentally, you become so responsible for this other human being. And physically, you're like, well, physically, I'm not doing anything, right? But mentally, you are running a marathon because you're anticipating everything and you're anxious and you're like, oh my Lord, are they still breathing? That's the
one
hardest
of the
thing.
one of the things that I thought was that postnatal depression was only a diagnosis given to the birth giver.
No, no.
Actually, that diagnosis can be given to any parent. And For me, it was more like I was so burnt out, I just couldn't cope anymore because my life had suddenly just immeasurably changed
Yeah. I mean,
forever.
things like what helped with me because it's certain pictures and stuff that really trigger me in terms of sensory stuff. Um, I got some like little earplugs, not loops. They're like little Alpine ones that are used for like music professionals or the like for gig goers, and you can have different things, and it just takes the edge off the crying. Now, I'm not saying that you can use that all the time. You can't. Um, I don't know if you're UK based. Peer support might be an idea. Um, see if you can find some other autistic parents. Um, but basically, the early years stuff, man, is you just got to get through it, getting through it.
And you will get through it.
Yeah, definitely. Um, but yeah, just find your rhythms, find your routines, get accept the help where you can,
Find
figure
your
out what you
flow.
can let go of. Yeah, and it's really hard.
But I think it's been a really good conversation
Mm,
tonight. It went in a direction that I didn't necessarily expect it to go, but this is one of the things I love about our neurodiversity in
mm.
discussion uh you know episodes that we do, because we have this interaction with the audience. There's always the risk that we can there's always the
I
risk.
do love a tangent though, and I think that's why we said we wanted to do it in discussion, didn't we?
Yeah,
Because we've got the idea that, you and I said that like every time we do a presentation, we've got to stick to the slides and people want to know about other things. And I really enjoy that. It's not like we're never going to do it again.
but that's what I love about the neurodiversity and discussion series that we're doing is, we know what topic we're starting or grounding ourselves in, but the conversation can really go in any direction.
And
um
actually, isn't that like genuine, authentic, neurodivergent conversation?
yeah. But I think this episode will have been a very good. It's going to be really good. I'm going to upload this as a podcast. In fact, I'll do that this evening because it'll only take me a few minutes. So remember, you can listen to back to this episode in its podcast format. And you can primarily find it on Substack, but it will also be available on Spotify and some of the other platforms. So do make sure you check it out if you want to. Um,
Yeah. And
and
if you have any kind of requests for the next one or a loose starting point that
Yeah,
you might want us to start at,
if anyone has a neurodiversity related topic they would like us to ground the next one in, let us know. I think we're aiming to do one probably in about a month's time. We're doing roughly one a month. So,
yeah,
if you have a subject, get it to me ASAP because I'll start advertising that one as well. But thank you so much for joining in and being an interactive audience. Um, I know a couple of people have actually only just joined. I'm sorry you've missed most of the live one, but you will be able to listen to the recording probably in the next 15-20 minutes. Um, but it's been really good. And I think I'm going to have to retitle this one as being about burnout and parenting, I think,
absolutely.
but it's been a really,
Burnout with a huge dash of parenting.
yeah. But obviously, you can check out everything across multiple websites. I've got my dghnconsultancy.co.uk, also the same one, but .org. That is my Substack newsletter, emergentdivergence.com, davidgrayhammond.co.uk. And don't forget, I also have the NeuroHub community that I'm running alongside Helen and Tanya. There's loads of ways of getting in contact through these things, so do check them out. And thank
And
you
if you
all.
need to get in contact with me, go to David. Because
Yes,
I am the opposite of David.
yes.
I hide.
But if you want to get in contact and talk about these things, just let me know, and
Cool.
we'll catch you all in the next one. So thank you very much. I've been David Gray Hammond, and Tanya has been Tanya.
Yeah. And I didn't even do a swear.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
See you. Bye bye now.